Hello. I am here today with Pierre Dubuc, co-founder and CEO of OpenClassrooms. OpenClassrooms has been a player in the EdTech future of workspace for a long time, and I've gotten to watch a lot of their journey from afar, first from the investor seat, and now from my seat as uh, writing about the business of education. Um, you've gone through a couple of evolutions, Pierre, and I'd love to talk through some of them. But before we get to that, would you mind just sort of introducing yourself and talking about your kind of story as a company leader, a founder? How did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. Hi, Matt, and thank you for letting me share my story today. Um, my name is Pierre. I started Open Classrooms more than 20 years ago now in France, where I grew up, and my co-founder Mathieu and I started the personal project when we were in middle school, really young, to create online courses, the courses we wish we had in school. It was all for free. It was not a company or anything. It was not commercial. And we taught coding mostly in French. It became kind of a mix of what would be Khan Academy, Code Academy in French-speaking countries, if you will. So it became the reference platform to learn coding in French. So we did that parallel to studies in middle school, in high school, in college. At some point, some of our friends told us that they learned everything they needed to learn to get their degree in college, thanks to our platform. And from there, we decided at the end of our college to create a company out of it and make it our full-time job. So that's the start of Open Classrooms. So that'd be now nearly 10, 15 years ago. And we created Open Classrooms as a mission-driven company. The mission is to make education accessible, education leading to jobs. So we are at this intersection of higher education and careers, the job market, corporate learning, workforce development. So we're all about accessibility in education leading to jobs. The social impact we track is the number of students we place in the workforce. That could be for a first job, a new job, switching careers, getting promoted.
I'd love, if you don't mind, just to take a second on, you're creating these courses as a middle schooler. Like, this sounds like silly and small, but like, what platform were you using at that point in time? Like, how did you like even have the skill to be able to do that? And then how did you translate that onto, was that like rudimentary YouTube? YouTube hasn't been around much longer than what you're talking about.
It was before YouTube and no videos back then. Yeah, the first website we created in 1999. My co-founder Mathieu created the first kind of text-based content. Then I started helping him in 2001. I developed the new platform in PHP. So very much into like nerdy stuff. And we built this community-based platform, learning platform. We built new courses. So essentially, Mathieu was writing courses, and I was developing the platform. For many years, it was mostly text-based, and then at some point, we built videos as well. But videos came on the internet like way later. So yeah, text videos. Then we created like certificate programs, then degree programs, and it evolved into something much more comprehensive like Open Classrooms today.
And was that just like a natural evolution, or was there what was the like strategy behind, like, today you offer fully accredited degree programs, and we're going to talk about that in a
Yeah.
second, but how did you get from there to there? Was that, an investor saying, hey, you should think about this next, or was that you guys just sort of feeling it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously, when we were in middle school, we didn't, get up
Exactly. I'm like,
and
what,
then be like,
you're
"Oh, we're gonna
what,
build a
12 years old? Like,
university." Yes. So no, that did not happen like this. But it came, I think, over time. But at some point, there was an inflection where we felt like, okay, now I would say sky is the limit. If you see what I mean. So Gradually, it came from building online courses, then another course, then another course, then we could expand, and it was quite gradual. I think some of the key milestones were when some of our teachers and friends told us, "I'm still in my college right now, but actually I learned everything through your platform, and I do that because I need the degree." And this is it kind of planted the seed of, oh, actually, if we create all of the value of what a college should be, then why aren't we the college?
Sure.
And then from there we started thinking about that. A few years later, we built the first fully online college in France, where we got degree awarding powers. So it took time, but at a certain scale, I think around probably some of our first investments, which was more than 10 years ago, we realized that, okay, actually there is no limits to what you can build, if you really, you have a vision and you work hard, you can build something really ambitious. So at that stage, we thought, okay, actually we could make it like a global platform, train thousands, maybe like hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, and from there, we built open classrooms as you know it.
Gotcha. And just for my own, like, you started with tech. What have you expanded to other sort of industry verticals? Is tech still the preponderance? What does the distribution look like?
Yeah, so we started with tech. Coding was the first field of study. Then we expanded into other like digital jobs, like digital marketing, AI, cybersecurity, etc. We expanded into other white collar jobs, like sales, management, leadership, HR, finance, etc. And then from there, we went into really entire new fields. Think of healthcare, social work, teaching, energy jobs. And we started around the bachelor's level, then we went postgrad, then we went associates. Now we do also more like technical high school level type of diplomas, like trade schools, if you will, for blue collar jobs. So it's a wide range of offerings now.
Gotcha. And one of the things that has always struck me about you guys, and I alluded to this before, is that you have managed your growth across the US and European markets. And maybe just to start off, like, a level set again of like, what markets do you currently operate in? And then I'll ask a couple of questions about how you deal with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we started in France. I think we're probably the main brand of online education or online higher education in French-speaking countries. So French-speaking Africa is also pretty strong in terms of the number of users we have. And then we expanded into English-speaking countries. So I'm based in New York now for a few years, and we expanded the business in the US and the UK as well. Broadly speaking, because we were a B2C company and a B2B company. On the B2C side, it's open, it's online, so we have students in 100+ countries. When it comes to B2B, we're really focused on North America and Europe.
And how did you think about, like, I imagine there was a point in the company's history where you had to decide, like, and maybe there wasn't actually because of the consumer side of the business. But like, you had to say, okay, we are going to open up to English speakers, right? It's not going
Mm,
to be just French. And or we're going to open this up to, the US market, and we're going to have to manage the complexities associated with operating in a highly regulated and multiple highly regulated markets that
yeah.
probably have some overlap, but a lot of like divergence as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's not easy. At some point we expanded also in other markets and failed. So long time ago we expanded into Spanish speaking
Okay,
countries and with big failure and we stopped it. And we expanded into the UK, which from France felt, quite close.
sure.
And we already had a lot of enterprise clients, like multinational companies, and they already required kind of a bilingual catalog of training programs. So having English speaking content was needed. So it was kind of a natural move. And then after the US, obviously we already had English content since the UK, and most of the market in terms of online higher education is in the US. It's like the
True.
largest post-secondary education market in the world when it comes to online. And a lot of our main competitors or partners and investors are actually US based. So it was kind of the next natural market for us.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it was a lot of sort of pull in the sense of market was asking for a certain thing. And by market, I mean, it sounds like some specific customers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we thought also we could bring something different to those markets, something needed. And at some point you take a leap of faith and build it for many years, and it's hard, and you have to keep going until you break through and find the right go to market, the right product market fit. Even though broadly speaking, I think training a data scientist in France or training a data scientist in the US not that far. But in terms of compliance, regulation, way to do business is quite different actually.
Yeah, and let's get in a little bit to the compliance and regulation because it's been top of mind for me with this whole AI wave of,
Yeah.
you know, you and I could start a new course company tomorrow with AI and code something that probably gets, sort of scarily close to what some in the space might offer pretty quickly. But there is this element of making sure that you are compliant and providing the level of quality that folks expect, that I think is a significant bridge for AI to handle. And you can tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. It sounds like you got your French accreditation some time ago, and I know just in the past couple of weeks you received your U.S. accreditation. Can you talk about like the timeline behind that and some of the decision making that said like, this was the time to get French accreditation and now it's the time to get US accreditation?
Yeah, so we started a long time ago with this idea I was mentioning, like, oh, can we become a college, right? And that was more than 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We obtained degree awarding powers. We were the first online college in France delivering in a fully online manner degree programs leading to bachelor's and master's. The minute we obtained accreditation, it really changed the trajectory of the company back then because people couldn't believe it. It was like the first time it was available in the market. Many students thought we were lying and we
And
didn't have this accreditation.
just to make sure I understand, like you instead of like what often happens is you providers will get accreditation via
But
another
yeah, yeah.
entity. Were you doing that or were you a standalone entity accredited?
So at first we did that via degree validation partnership through a university or school partner. And
Okay,
at some point we also got a direct accreditation and direct degrees with OpenClassrooms as the name of the institution on the
gotcha.
degree. But it took some time to get there. Usually, like the first milestone is a little bit easier in partnership. And yeah, it really moved the needle. I think it signals quality to the market, to students, to families, to employers, policymakers as well. And it opens up also access to more funding. So in the US, for example, that would be the equivalent of Title IV and Pell Grants,
Sure.
kind of a similar system in every country. If you want to tap in public funding, you need to be accredited locally, which makes sense. So we did that, and it really accelerated the business. So a few years later, when we started developing the US market, we thought, okay, we're gonna get into apprenticeship because this is what we do and degrees. So we became registered with the US DOL and a bunch of different state DOL as well to operate as a registered apprenticeship provider. We're successful in that. And then we build partnerships with universities and community colleges to articulate course credits to our programs, vice versa. And then in parallel, we decided to build our own university accreditation with the regional accreditation body called WASC in California, so one of the 6 regional ones. The intent was to get our own degree awarding powers directly as we build in France. After France, we built it in 19 countries in Africa as well.
Well,
And then we did last in the US. It took us about 4 years to build the entire accreditation. It takes a long time. It's a multi-year process. You need, an eligibility phase. You need a huge application file. You need on-site visits. It's very thorough. But we're pretty pleased to really show the model as we operate it, and we really try to explain how different it is from more traditional universities and higher education institutions. But that we were focused on similar, things like student outcomes, graduation, job placement rates, quality, and we had like really strong quality standards and processes in place, and amazing student outcomes. So I think WASC really appreciated that and was also flexible and open to innovation, which was something important to us, that we wanted to work with an accreditation body that would be open to something different, yet still very high quality, high level of standards.
yeah, and I'd love to get into, why WASC and what the process was like for them. So for folks who don't know, regional accreditation is the gold standard in the US. And the past 5 years have been pretty complicated for regional accreditors. The first Trump administration, of course, actually we call them regional accreditors, but he sort of de-regionalized them in the sense that, a school in any point at any part of the US could get accredited by any accreditor. It used to be very much defined by geographic boundaries. Today it is not. Um, the second Trump administration has, talked about additional changes to accreditors. Some of the states have put together their own versions of accreditors or are in the process of doing so. We don't have to get into any of those sort of news items, but I'd like to hear what was the process like with WASC, and particularly like what were the points where you sort of were expecting more complications and didn't have them? And what were the points where you had to do some educating yourselves of like, hey, this is what we believe a good apprenticeship
Yeah.
looks like. Here's why, and sort of leading them along.
Yeah, good questions. So I think first of all, we really enjoyed working with WASC. I thought the process, the questions, the audit, the on-site visit were very relevant. And I was actually quite impressed by the quality of the team they assembled. And, we're probably audited by about 10 to 15 different entities and regulators and
Whoa.
states every year. It's like
Huh.
crazy. So we're audited all the time. and
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 that's across all of your
across,
geographies.
yeah, across
Okay.
regions, so we might be audited by USDOL or by a state agency or by another accreditation body in another region, by a funding body, et cetera, et cetera. So we're pretty used to that. But I have to say, like most of the time, I find the question they ask not so relevant. Like sometimes they don't know which questions they should ask. But I think it was quite different with WASC. I think they were extremely thorough. They really had their eyes on the prize, so we're pretty impressed by that. And we saw that also as a kind of a collaborative process where, I mean, if you ask any organization 1,000 questions, for sure, not everything will be perfect, right? So
Sure.
we knew where we felt a little bit weaker, but it was quite constructive, I think. So it was really interesting to also have this framework and review, have a kind of a 360 review of our model and say, okay, we're really strong there, here, this is where we can still invest and improve. So this kind of growth mindset, I think, was really ingrained in the process, which we appreciated. So a couple of thoughts on what we felt, um, went well or we felt strong about. The one thing we felt strong about was the robustness of our pedagogy, and how we teach skills and we assess skills. We're pretty confident on that, and it felt like, yes, like WASC recognized that. Even though at first they might think like it's really non-traditional, it's too different. Is that really significant? Is that quality? I think they were really convinced. I think our focus on outcomes, student outcomes, and being super data driven. I think that's the thing we live in, and we didn't realize that until they came and said, "Wow, this is really impressive how you're like laser focused on completion rate, graduation rate, job placement in the field of study with the right level of salary, et cetera, et cetera." Our focus on our mission to make education accessible and to serve underserved populations in priority, I think, was really highlighted. We were a little bit worried about the fact that we don't have a campus. We're online. We
Ah,
don't
yeah,
we don't have a library. We
sure.
don't have a
Which is
stadium.
a traditional requirement of accreditation, right?
It is in certain
For
so
better or for
WASC,
worse.
for better or for worse, but like for WASC, it is not strictly a requirement. It's definitely something that they would look at. But it was really interesting conversation. So, for example, take the example of a library. No, we don't have a library, but what is the request behind the library? It's like, do you provide access to quality educational resources and things like that? And to that question, we do. So when you kind of unpack those questions and think about what's behind them, then we had really interesting conversations. So it was the same on research and sharing our insights to the rest of the higher ed community, and that we work a lot with community colleges and universities and research labs also around instructional design and cognitive sciences and so on. So many things we could tell, but just not framed exactly the same way as traditional universities. So I think it overall it went well. Even on a few scopes where we felt like, okay, we're gonna be pretty weak on that, and that's just not what we do. We're just different, but we had really insightful conversations with them.
I really like the example of the library and the sort of traditional expectation of, I think, like a physical library. And
Yeah,
I think when I talk to many of the stakeholders involved at companies, at universities, at accreditors themselves, the temptation is sort of a more is more, right? Of to say, well, let's figure out how to sort of stuff an apprenticeship into the existing framework, right? And we'll sort of jam it in there, and
yeah,
in the name of, we'll just make it easier for everybody if we do that, rather than what it sounds like you did of taking a step back and saying, what is the ask behind this, right? Like, why was it at a point in time important to have a library?
yeah,
Well, it's access to resources for all students and the accessibility of those resources. So, I think that shows a level of thoughtfulness
yeah,
that is not a given, right? Like, in
absolutely.
many ways, it might have been easier for you to just like, buy a library somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Which is sort of a
exactly. I
silly
mean,
silly concept, but like, yeah,
we thought, honestly, we thought we would have to do something like that at some point, for kind of the missing 10 to 20%, and say, okay, we're gonna have to plug the gaps here and there, even though we're not completely convinced this creates value to students. And
Sure.
we don't want to do that, but we thought that that could be a request. But we're pretty pleased that it was not the case. Actually, I think all of the requests from us, we felt like, yeah, I think they're a good request, and they create value to students and employers and the community, and they're relevant, and we can definitely improve on this and that. And we didn't feel forced to do something that we felt was counterproductive.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a good thought partner to say,
Exactly.
let's actually assess what the modern learner needs. So I want to be cognizant of time here. I've one, maybe two more sort of open-ended questions that you can sort of take wherever you like. When you think about both the work that Open Classrooms does and, the higher ed space writ large in, call it, the 5 to 10-year time horizon. So not sci-fi, but also not like next 12 months. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you think will be common then that are not common today? And you are allowed to say apprenticeships, but I expect a very good answer if that's going to be the answer.
Okay, let's start with apprenticeship. Yeah, I do expect apprenticeship degrees to be much more common. It's not really a big thing in the US right now, but we've seen that change in Europe in the past 10 years. 10 years ago, apprenticeship in France, for example, was only about trade jobs, blue collar jobs like carpenter, electricians, etc., like it is today in the US. And then there was public policy, massive public policy shift, additional funding, going from kind of higher ed only into higher ed and apprenticeship. And that really unlocked opportunities to many underserved populations, by the way, to access what we call apprenticeship degrees, which is a way to graduate from an associate, bachelor's, or even master's degrees, being employed from day one. So it's a work and study program. You work for 3 to 4 days a week. You learn on the job. You're getting paid, and you have 1 or 2 days of classroom-based learning. Um, the two of them, the on-the-job training and the classroom-based learning, will grant you with credits. At the end, you get a college degree. Tuition fees are fully covered by employers. It's debt-free. You're actually getting paid wages while you learn. It's almost too good to be true, quite frankly, but it really, I think, creates strong alignment also between what you learn and what is needed by employers, because they pay. So they want to make sure that you learn the right skills that they need, so you can create business outcomes essentially. So I do think that higher ed will kind of realign more and more towards employers' needs, and apprenticeship could be a great way to do that, as we've seen in other markets. So that is one. My second one, also not very original, but is around AI. I do think that education will and is actually massively impacted by AI, both in the skills and jobs and types of degrees and the content that we teach today in today's world and tomorrow's world. Like what skills do you need in kind of this new AI world? And how you teach it as well, because you can have, what we call, for example, AI companion and ask your questions 24 hours a day and have kind of some sort of like tutor that is AI based like this to learn faster and provide more one-on-one support to more students in an economical way. So those two things, I think apprenticeship and AI will, I believe, massively scale in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And this is sort of a companion question to that. And unfortunately, this time you can't use open classrooms as a specific example. But I'd like you to imagine that you are 18 years old again,
Yeah.
and you are thinking about the next 2 years of your life. Um, how are you spending that time? And to give you a second to think about it, I'll talk about my own thoughts on this topic. And to me, I think what I would focus on is trying to find some sort of formative work experience,
Yeah.
probably not associated with the classroom. And I go back to some of the odd jobs I did during college, but that were sort of very part time rather than a true in depth experience, which was tending bar,
Mm,
doing door to door sales,
yeah.
working a customer service job at that very service oriented skills, working on building those up. And then two, trying to find some sort of more white collar professional work experience to go with it, right? And being able to balance, what does work in the service world look like? What are those foundational skills of service? And then, what are the academic building blocks and professional building blocks that I'll need for a longer term career. So I'll give you the floor. You can answer that wherever you will, but I do have to say, you can't say I would enroll in open classrooms. Uh,
That's fair. That's fair. I think so 18 years ago, I was 18 years old. And at that time, I wanted to learn. I was eager to learn a lot. Ideally, I would have wanted to learn through professional experiences, but back then was not really an option, quite frankly.
yeah,
So I went to college. I also wanted to build more like social relationships and have like this kind of out of my parents' home
sure.
experience, you know.
Yeah,
So I think I would look for professional experiences. I would look for living abroad for a couple of months, try a few different things. But I would look for something where I can learn and grow very quickly and where it would unlock new opportunities, like the next stage of opportunities. So not something that would make me like kind of flatline,
sure.
but would unlock opportunities and then probably still go to college. And by that, I mean not necessarily open classrooms, but like in-person college for maybe 2 or 3 years, then go and work somewhere, then come back, do a master's, etc. But this kind of back and forth between training, education, and professional experiences, I think, would have been the best for me.
That resonates. And I think, it's easy to take the position of, you know, only work or only liberal arts.
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, like you're sort of finding that intersection and weaving between them over the course of particularly your early career really resonates. So thank you for both that and for taking the time to chat today. Congratulations on the US accreditation. I can only imagine the long nights that went into achieving that. So well done. I hope you were able to celebrate at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure at this point you're like, back to work. I got bigger and better things to do.
Pretty much. Yeah. Thank you, Matt, so much.
Awesome.